going to get started, and some people might trickle in as we get started. That's really fine. So, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sarah Bruni. I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform, and I want to welcome you to our forum on inspiring investment in Chicago neighborhoods. I'm really excited to share this wonderful lineup of business, government, and nonprofit leaders that we have with us today. As many of you know, ICPR is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization advocating transparent and accountable government in Illinois. Part of our mission has led us to discuss how local leaders can be more accountable to residents in Chicago neighborhoods, where a lot of grassroots groups and residents have really dedicated their lives to increasing communication and trust and access to resources in their neighborhoods. So as we've seen many large-scale plans for economic development and investment in Chicago neighborhoods from our panelists today, we think it's important to discuss how, what the strategic purposes of these investments are, how success will be measured, and how local residents will be incorporated into the implementation of these investments. Economic development in Chicago neighborhoods, as many of you know, isn't just good for business. It provides critical resources to residents, including jobs, fewer vacant storefronts, and new revenue for the community. Today we want to focus on how large-scale strategic efforts can be sure that their projects have positive outcomes for both the investors and the residents that they're looking to serve. So our moderator for today's discussion is Kristen Barrett. She's Senior Director of the University of Chicago Polsky Exchange, a business incubator on the South Side. Kristen has significant economic development experience, and I was thrilled when she agreed to serve as today's moderator. At the end of our event, our panelists will be available for a Q&A discussion, so be thinking about your questions as they have their panel discussion. We'd like to thank Columbia College for graciously hosting us today, and we'd like to thank CAN TV for carrying this event live. If you know of anyone who couldn't make it here, they can tune in live to channel 27 in Chicago or online at cantv.org. And we are also live streaming today's event at our Facebook page, and we'll be tweeting photos and parts of the discussion, and you can join in on that discussion by using the hashtag InvestChi, and to do that at ILCampaign. So last thing, a little bit of housekeeping, you'll find event evaluation cards in your program, so please fill those out for us and return them when you leave. That really, really helps us focus for future events and figure out what worked and what we could improve. So without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator, Kristen Barrett, to come forward and begin today's discussion.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming out today. We're really, really excited to speak with all of you and have a fantastic panel for you. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Kristen Barrett, and I run a business incubator called the Polsky Stage at the University of Chicago. Very excited to be here because this topic is really near and dear to our hearts and what we do at both the Polsky Center, but at the university much more broadly, especially being located where we are in Hyde Park. So my work at the Polsky Center surrounds economic development, particularly on Chicago's South Side. We drive the creation of new businesses at the University of Chicago and in the local neighborhoods through a variety of programs and educational content for small business owners and entrepreneurs. A couple of companies that we're most well known for include Grubhub, which you probably all know, and if anybody is like me, might even survive on a little bit, and as well as Braintree Venmo. Both of those companies are finalists in our #1 business plan competition in the country. It's the top business accelerator program nationally, the New Venture Challenge. We've spawned more than 180 companies, returning more than $5 billion to investors, and probably most importantly, creating thousands of jobs throughout the world. In the South Side efforts that we have, we run a 34,000 square foot facility on 53rd Street in downtown Hyde Park, which is part of a larger effort to really invest in the Hyde Park community. We have about 1,200 new jobs in the area, about 700 entrepreneurs from the South Side of Chicago that have no previous affiliation to the university looking out of the space, as well as about 3,000 entrepreneurs who have affiliation to the university coming in and out and building their businesses. I think most importantly, we're really excited about the growth opportunity that we see in the South Side in building jobs. So we have partnered with a developer called Wexford Science and Technology and are putting up about 250 170,000 square feet of space that will be a real innovation hub and community on 53rd Street that we encourage you all to visit when it opens in 2020. We'll be breaking ground later this year. One of the most important pieces of that building is two partnerships that we're really excited about. Working with University of Illinois, and particularly a lot of their top-tier engineers, as well as the Army Research Laboratory, which is committed to being a part of the conference as well. So it's a really exciting development for the South Side, and I shared all of this with you to give you a bit of an idea of the type of investments that we're making, and I'm really excited to turn it over to our panel to talk more about the investments that they see as opportunities in our variety of neighborhoods, and really what potential we can capitalize on as we make these investments. So to start off, I would like to ask each of our panelists to share a little bit about themselves and introduce themselves and their expertise. Deputy Governor Leslie Mumford, would you mind starting?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join us today. I am one of two deputy governors for Governor Rauner in the state of Illinois. And my role in the governor's office is to oversee externally oriented things for the state, jobs and economic development being the largest area there, certainly very relevant to this topic, along with constituent affairs and Illinois bicentennial planning. So I wear a lot of hats in the governor's office. I have to say, when I heard the opening from Sarah and the conversation today, I bring to this role a background both in state government currently as the deputy governor, formerly as the Illinois State Controller, where I spent a lot of time in neighborhoods working with community groups, working to try and identify how we can help bring more industry, more jobs, more stability to a lot of neighborhoods. I also have a long history in business, being former director of the hair care business at Elaine Curtis, just down here downtown Chicago. And finally, as a board of director and member, former board member of an organization that serves developmentally disabled adults. And I can say, I guess really from my whole patchwork of all my experiences, is the most important thing that we can do is to ensure that our families, our children, wherever they are, have safe neighborhoods to grow up in, have a future where they can have jobs, etc. So I really like my role now, where I can have a part of that. Before I turn it over, I guess, this is an interesting thing for the state to be part of, talking about Chicago neighborhoods, because we do not do this on our own in the state. We really partner with what goes on in the city and a lot of other organizations and around the municipal area. But we bring two important areas, and that is with respect to workforce development, job training, education, etc., which I'm sure we'll probably get into, as well as business attraction and development and incentives for businesses to come here. And there's a lot actually going on in the state right now, and we're working with the city on those. So maybe I'll stop there and turn it over to
Kevin. All right. So hello everyone, my name is Kevin Davenport. I am the Associate Loan Officer for Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, which our parent company, Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, does a lot of focus on commercial and residential redevelopment, primarily focused on the south and west side of Chicago. And I'm also here representing Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives Microfinance Group, which is a nonprofit alternative micro lender, which can lend up to $50,000 for startup entrepreneurs and small business owners. And really, I'm just excited and grateful to be here. I know the media paints this picture that Chicago has such negative things going on, but being from this perspective, I see all the investments and all the good things happening here. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and continue to look for solutions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Johnson. I'm the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Chicago Urban League. The Chicago Urban League is a 100-year-old civil rights organization, and our Entrepreneurship Center specifically supports about 500 business owners annually, helping them with business strategy, access to capital, and providing them with exposure for their brand and really helping them get into new markets. Our center last fiscal year 2017, supported businesses in getting about $55 million in contracts, about 121 total. We did close to 900 hours of one-on-one coaching and consulting and about 4,000 hours of business training. So we do a lot of work to make sure that businesses get the resources that they need to launch and grow. Prior to becoming director of the Entrepreneurship Center, I'm an entrepreneur as well. I ran a consultancy for 5 years, focusing on business development in the South Side, and I also have a technology startup as well. So pretty much I've seen business in a variety of different ways on the support side as an entrepreneur myself. So I'm really excited about this panel, talking about ways that we can support neighborhood business development, and just listening to everybody's thoughts and ideas on how to solve this problem.
Good afternoon, I'm Evelyn Diaz. I'm the president of Heartland Alliance for Human Needs and Human Rights. And a little bit about Heartland Alliance. It is a global nonprofit that got its start here about 130 years ago, almost now, and provides services annually now to 400,000 of the most marginalized people in society. We do that by providing housing, healthcare, jobs, and justice services, and we also have a research and policy division that does policy and advocacy and produces a poverty report that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes. My own career has been entirely in nonprofit social services. I have worked primarily on violence against women issue, and probably have logged most of my career years in workforce development, skills development. And then most recently, before becoming president of Heartland Alliance, served both mayors, first in the mayor's office under Mayor Daley, being the liaison to all the human capital departments, and then under Mayor Emanuel as a commissioner of the Department of Family and Support Services, overseeing the city's investments in social services, everything from early childhood to aging programs. So I'm happy to be here, and particularly to, while I'll set a little bit of the context to really move beyond what we know is happening in our disinvested communities and moving towards solutions.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Spray, and I'm with JPMorgan Chase. I'm with the company about 12 years, and I head up our corporate responsibility work in a 13-state region in the central part of the country. Just as some context, my footprint runs from Michigan over to Minnesota and sort of down through Texas. The largest states in that territory are obviously Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and Texas. And we contribute about $35 million to not-for-profit organizations in that footprint. And corporate responsibility is structured differently for different companies. For us, it includes our philanthropic giving team. Many of you probably know Whitney Smith, who leads our philanthropic giving in that space. Our government relations teams, the people that sit in that region and work in that area. Our community relations teams, and then we have a sustainable finance team that's growing and is predominantly based in New York. And we announced this fall, most of you probably know, a $40 million commitment to Chicago, a 3-year commitment. We're very excited about it. And really, we did it because we think there's tremendous inspiring work and collaboration going on here. And we're just excited to be represented on the panel today and look forward to the conversation.
Well, welcome to all of you. We're really excited to have you, and it's a really fantastic panel to be pulling together. So to kick it off, Evelyn, I wondered if you could give us a little bit more detail about some of the research that you mentioned. Particularly, you produce a cycle of risk report. Could you tell us a little bit about what your findings have been around lack of local economic development, and what effect that has on Chicago neighborhoods?
Sure. So about a little over 10 years ago, even though Heartland Alliance had been working in low-income communities since we were born, and we understood that poverty and economic insecurity were really at the root of many of the problems faced by the populations that we served, we also noticed that in the public space, there wasn't really a comprehensive and accessible conversation, and certainly not information that people could use to talk about solutions. And so we created a poverty report that became an annual poverty report that was designed to reach broader audiences, and really focus in on accessible information that people could take action on. And so that created this this kind of annual report. Last year's report, and there's always a theme to the reports. Last year's report, we really wanted to explore the relationship between poverty, violence, and trauma. And through that, and I have a couple of reports in case anybody wants to peruse one or take one with you. But we really wanted to take a look at this intersection, and the report really just argued that in order to address Chicago's violence, we had to do more than just focus on policing and traditional violence prevention programs, but we also needed to be investing in economic development, economic opportunity, and mental health at the community level. That said, I want to just tell you a couple of kind of the highlights of the report on what we know about poverty in Chicago. 42% of Chicagoans are either low income or living in poverty. Of the population living in poverty, 60% of Chicago's poor are African American or Latino. Children are the most affected demographic group. 40% of Black children and nearly 30% of Latino children live in poverty. That is a statewide number. And that should be shameful enough. But poverty actually has been concentrating rather dramatically in our lowest income communities. The number of poor people living in our highest poverty neighborhoods in Chicago has grown 384% since 2000. These neighborhoods are predominantly home to African Americans and Latinos. And why this matters is that place matters, neighborhoods matter, where we live matters. It matters for the kinds of jobs that are available to us, the schools that our children are able to attend, the apartments that are available to rent, the grocery stores that we go to. It matters for what doctors we go to visit and the banks where we put our money in. And so obviously in our very poorest communities, we're less likely to have those kinds of things, or we have them at a very poor quality, or we don't have them at all. And importantly, we also start to see really insidious, vicious cycles starting, where high poverty communities are more likely to have older buildings, vacant buildings, poorly maintained buildings, where children are more likely to be exposed to lead. We have more vacant buildings that reduce neighborhood appeal and provide venues for illegal activity. Difficulties attracting businesses, difficulties attracting employment opportunities, poor schools with limited educational opportunities. And this cycles on and on. So the disinvestment in these neighborhoods has had snowballing and really devastating effects over time. And we argued in this report that the most tragic of these effects has been this insidious cycle of poverty, violence, and trauma. I'm not going to go into all of the stuff that we said about that particular dynamic, that particular cycle, but I want to point out that several studies, including some rigorous studies that have been done here in Chicago, give me some hope about this, because they show what happens when you address lack of income and when you address economic opportunity head on. Specifically, they show that a really dramatic, positive, and lasting effect that jobs and therapeutic interventions can have on school outcomes for youth, on income outcomes for youth and adults, and importantly, on reducing violence involvement for youth and adults. So I'm going to stop there, because I know we have a lot to hear from other panelists, but I just wanted to share that, because of all the diving that we've done and into the data to uncover what many of you know. It's dramatic. It keeps getting more dramatic, and there's hope. There's hope that we've seen, studied. It shows that investing in Chicago neighborhoods and in the people in these neighborhoods can pay big dividends.
Evelyn, that's fantastic context. We really appreciate that setting the larger stage. And I wondered if I could move to Jason and Kevin now and ask you to each speak a little bit about the role of local business and local economic development leaders in influencing positive change in these neighborhoods that Evelyn is speaking about.
You want to take that first one? Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. I think the the issue is complex, but it's simple at the same time. I think ultimately we need to be able to create jobs in underserved communities because nothing stops a bullet like a job. If people are able to fulfill their basic economic needs, fulfill those lower two levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, biological needs, shelter, then they're able to you know, do things for their family, they're able to send their kids to college, they're able to take care of themselves, which reduces the likelihood that they'll get involved in criminal activity, robbing people, because oftentimes a lot of this crime is for survival. It's out of desperation to be able to provide for your family and do things. So that's the simple part of it. We have to create jobs. Now, how we go about doing that, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So pretty much according to the US Census, a survey of business owners, only 3% of African American businesses, and I'm just going to use African American community as an example, there's similar disparities in the Latino community as well, but only 3% of African American owned businesses are able to hire full-time employees. So only 3% of them. So if small businesses create 64% of the jobs in this country, right? And only 3% of black-owned businesses are able to hire, you know, are able to take on full-time employees, and they're more likely to hire the people in their community, people who are ex-offenders who are looking for opportunities and things of that nature, then that kind of explains, in a lot of respects, the unemployment issue that we're having in black and brown communities. So pretty much some of the issues and some of the reasons that we're having some of these disparities is because you know, black and brown firms in general, they're having challenges with the 3 M's, which is markets, getting access to markets, management knowledge, and access to capital, which is money. So pretty much, I know a lot of times we look at, okay, we can solve the job issue by bringing Walmart into a community, or we can solve the job issue by bringing a Target, but that's an anchor organization, right? What are we doing as far as taking that momentum and creating sustainable businesses in the community to make it thrive? So I think we need to be a little bit more intentional about helping businesses scale so that they can hire, you know, employees, helping them become, you know, increase their capacity so they can go after procurement opportunities either as primes or subs. So I think these are some of the things that we can do in these communities, because if we're able to increase the capacity of the businesses in these communities to create jobs, they'll be able to hire people, which will really help with the violence and the poverty in these underserved communities.
And you know, that's actually a good segue for me actually, because you know, our Chicago neighborhood initiatives got started, like I said, with the commercial and residential, you know, investments and redevelopment, which, you know, we focus, you know, for example, we'll identify a food desert, and so we'll solve that issue by bringing in an anchor sponsor such as Walmart. But bringing in someone like a Walmart or Whole Foods or Mariano's, that helps to bring in more traffic to attract other smaller businesses. But throughout about second year of doing that with Chicago neighborhood initiatives, we realized we're like, oh, we need more small businesses to, you know, hire within the neighborhood, circulate funding, and the biggest obstacle for an entrepreneur is getting access to capital. So we actually started the microfinance group to combat that issue head on. So we are an alternative microlender, which means we have more of a holistic approach as far as underwriting. So we can work with challenge credit. We can work with little to no collateral. We pretty much do everything that we can to get to a yes. Because we truly believe that, you know, local businesses are the bones of the community. You know, seeing, you know, outside of the obvious factors of, like, you know, circulating funds and even, you know, providing jobs, there's a lot of other extra beneficial factors for having these small businesses, you know, thrive in the community. For example, you know, now the small business owner can now be a role model or mentor to some of the other people in the community. And then you can even go as far as, like, the broken glass theory would suggest, you know, seeing boarded up windows and graffiti on windows or graffiti on the building will promote disorder and uncivility, whereas the opposite has to suggest something positive. You know, to see small businesses come in and see the same disadvantaged building now have a fresh coat of paint, now have, you know, civilians promoting and using this new service, has to have a positive effect on the community. So we're just really passionate about that and kind of driving that change.
Thanks so much. We'd like to dig in a little bit more on some of the projects that the panelists are working on right now. And Dan, I wondered if you could kick it off by talking a little bit more about the $40 million that you're investing in Chicago, and really how are you measuring the impact of this work, and what are you looking for it to do?
Sure. So many of the themes that people shared today sort of guided the work of our investment in this initiative. And I think many of you picked up this one pager on the way in. It might be a helpful reference point. So about 3 or 4 years ago, JPMorgan Chase took a close look at the impact we were having with our global philanthropy funding. And we felt like we really weren't moving the needle and wanted to refine our areas of focus. And our overarching goal is to really impact economic mobility and people's access to more shared prosperity. And we have 4 main areas of focus that you'll see on this one pager in the circular diagram. I mean, it's really workforce readiness. How do we help individuals develop the skills that they need to get the jobs that are available? We all have read in the newspaper about the skills gap, that tens of thousands of jobs potentially go unfilled because there's a strange supply and demand disconnect between the training that's available in technology, healthcare, manufacturing, and then the actual jobs that are available. So we're really digging in, working with nonprofits in that space. Supporting small businesses, really how can we, small businesses in low to moderate income communities, help them, have better management, access markets, and think about capital. That's really the focus of our Small Business Forward initiative. And then financial capability, how can individuals and families hopefully improve the financial health that they have? Perhaps that's the most important, because when you get a job, when your business does succeed, because I think this is a real challenge for small business owners as well, how can you be a more effective manager of those resources, to build assets, to build capital, increase savings, and think more long-term. And then neighborhood revitalization is also a critical initiative for us. So those are the 4 main areas of focus. We don't dig in all 4 areas in every city. We do in Chicago, and have done a lot in that area. And then I'll talk a little bit about outcome and impacts. We did launch, prior to this $40 million initiative, this is just one example of the way we try to measure impact. We launched a pro-neighborhoods initiative across the full domestic footprint. And pro-neighborhoods, essentially, community development financial institutions are very important financial resource and assets for people in the communities. They're often competing for funding. So when we launched pro-neighborhoods nationally, we put an RFP out saying, how can you collaborate around a unique challenge or opportunity? We were really excited when one of the first cohorts of the Pro-Neighborhoods Initiative was funded here in Chicago. This Chicago Community Loan Fund, NHS, and CLCF were all 3 given a grant of $5 million to hopefully renovate about 430 homes, single 1 to 4 unit homes in key neighborhoods. At the end of the project, they actually renovated 600. They far exceeded their goals. And we actually had Harvard, the Office of Urban Affairs, do a study on the impact and why that was so successful. So we actually do, in certain circumstances, commission a study to look at a specific program. When we do a workforce program where we're asking a nonprofit to do specific training, like the North Lawndale Employment Network has a really terrific CTA engineers mechanics training program. Clearly in that program, we asked them to have a goal of training 75 to 100 people, making sure they get placed in the jobs, and we manage or monitor metrics in that way. Then the third way is we often fund an evaluation. We'll talk a little bit about READY, I think, a new program that Heartland Alliance is taking a leadership role on, and we're going to be funding the evaluation of that initiative. And then fourth, really, we are interested in trying to think about how, when you layer on investments in a community, in a neighborhood, what's the impact you're having and how you measure that. And that's really an ongoing dialogue that we're spending a lot of time talking to the nonprofits and foundations about in Chicago.
Thanks, that's very helpful. I think I wanted to add on one piece of this is that you've done similar work in Detroit. What did you learn from working in Detroit? Maybe some lessons that you might be applying here in Chicago?
I mean, one lesson that we learned, and back to the diagram, was it's not only about investing our philanthropic capital, but what are the other assets that we as a company can bring to the table? And since Detroit was such a large investment, we spent a lot of time trying to better align our local line of business leaders, making sure they were represented on the right nonprofit boards, thinking about the skill set and financial expertise that they have that they can bring to bear on a specific problem, as well as thinking about our employee volunteerism. We have about 3,000 employees in Detroit. How can we be really focused in what they're doing in the community and align it with our investments? And then we also, around the time we launched Detroit, we launched something called the JPMorgan Chase Institute. We have access to 60 million customers' credit card and debit card data, spending habits that they have from week to week, month to month, day to day, and trying to anonymize that data, obviously protecting people's privacy, but we can glean significant insights about people's spending patterns and how that may be impacting a specific neighborhood. For instance, in Detroit, we actually used the JPMorgan Chase Institute to take a look at, in 3 or 4 key neighborhoods, where there are a clear food desert, how far were people driving to visit a grocery store, access a pharmacy, and if a new grocery store opened up, like a Whole Foods, how's that changing spending patterns? It's very interesting. A Whole Foods opened up near the downtown area, and I think Whole Foods did it as sort of a philanthropic initiative. They did not anticipate it would be a successful store. What they found out pretty quickly is that people from 10 to 15 miles away were driving in to access that store because they were curious about what's happening in this neighborhood. What's the impact? So just really trying to think more strategically and cohesively about how we can bring all of our assets to bear to a problem. And those are all part of the Chicago initiative.
And we've taken a look at some of that data, and it's really helped us inform also in working with our small businesses, which ones do have significant working capital needs versus longer pay cycles and other challenges, and it's been very helpful. So it's very interesting. So Leslie, I'd like to change the conversation a little bit and ask you to tell us a little bit more about what's going on with the Discovery Partners Institute. Could you tell us a little bit more about what it is and what impact and opportunities you see in the local neighborhoods as you work with them?
Sure. So before I address the Discovery Partners Institute specifically, I'd just like to say, there are a lot of areas the state does to support some of the things that we have just heard. In the area of workforce development, which is one of the things that the Discovery Partners Institute is a piece of. We also are involved in partnering with companies in apprentice training that helps find students in areas where they typically don't have good role models to get them connected to community or city or colleges, and with businesses and kind of a learn and earn opportunity that helps them then take those skills back to their neighborhoods. We have EDGE credits, tax credits, that help support businesses that want to come in both in training new employees, but also businesses that want to locate in areas that are called empowerment zones that need development, some of the things that Kevin was talking about. And as part of the Illinois Bicentennial, we'll be announcing soon a STEM program that's going into 25 schools around the state, into schools that currently don't have these programs. It's a 3-year program funded by private donors, corporations in the state, but a lot of things that we do in the area of workforce development. And then the other side of the coin is bringing businesses in to fill in these spots. We have a group that's called Intersect Illinois. It's a public-private partnership for the state that goes out and really it's the marketing and sales arm for the state of Illinois to find businesses that want to come in, and we specifically try and target neighborhoods and areas that need development. One of the things that we have done recently was announced last October by the governor, and as a collaboration with University of Illinois, University of Chicago, and Northwestern University, is a project called the Discovery Partners Institute. It really is neighborhood development, and that it is developing essentially the 78th neighborhood for the city of Chicago. It is planned for the area that is bounded on the north side by Roosevelt Road, on the south side by 22nd Street, on the west side by the river, and the east side Clark Street. And if you looked at a map, you would see this is just a big empty lot right now, very difficult to get to. So it's been a collaboration with the city, with our universities. The intent of the Discovery Partners Institute is to be really an economic development engine for the state of Illinois, where we bring talent, engineering talent, entrepreneurship talent, instead of having our youth who want to develop companies who graduate from U of I or some of our other universities and then go to a coast to start their startup business, to keep them here locally. So Discovery Partners is the idea of taking that talent, engineering, technology talent, connecting it with access to capital and to businesses to help launch these businesses here so they can locate here in the Chicago area, in Illinois, stay here, and be economic engines for the state. It is a very exciting collaboration because it touches a lot of different groups. And the areas of focus are in things that we need to be strong in Illinois in the future. Computing and big data, advanced manufacturing, food science, agricultural and food development, and in the area of healthcare, life sciences, biomedical. And so these are the focuses. Governor and I actually were recently on a trip to Israel, and we met with a lot of companies. If you know much about Israel, it's a kind of startup nation, and how they commercialize, how they get these technologies up and running. And so we're working on collaborations with several of their universities to bring that talent here. And the hope is that Discovery Partners will be a collaboration of our state's top universities, our state's top engineering and science talent, that we will develop a neighborhood down there that will support, and right now the plans are for over $300 million of private investment into that area that is retail, cultural, residential, educational, development of the riverfront along, connecting the direct south loop with kind of more of the west-south loop area, so that we really bring our neighborhoods together. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that. We probably get to Q&A, but very exciting opportunity for us to really put an engine for economic development and talent development into the city of Chicago, where it can spawn hopefully a lot of businesses that can go a lot of places.
And so one question I want to build on both of these projects about is, now, none of these things can be done alone. When you have a $40 million deployment of investments, when you're doing something on the scale of the DPI, these things require collaboration and opportunity. Can you talk, can all the panelists, or a few of you jump in and talk a little bit about how you do collaborate across organizations as part of investing in Chicago's neighborhoods?
Well, and maybe I'll just jump in initially, because one of the other things I did recently kind of relates to a lot of this as well, is lead the state's team for the Amazon second headquarters bid, working very closely in collaboration with the team at the mayor's office. And I think, the collaboration we have is a fantastic team. We put together, I think, a first-rate response to what Amazon wants. We're cautiously optimistic that we will be, at least in the first, make this first cut. But what it starts with is having common goals and having everyone understand and be on the same page with what's important. And putting, in this case, we put politics aside, everybody put it behind them, and we said, what do we need to do? This is good for Chicago, it's good for the state. It will help our entire, help people around. If we can bring Amazon here, what do we have to do it? Same with Discovery Partners. We, worked, it might normally be hard for universities to all say, hey, I'm all together, but all three, U of I, U of C, and Northwestern got involved in this, working with the state, and the city is involved in this because it requires the addition of a red line stop on the property, and extension of some of the city streets. And so it's really been a collaboration of how do we put the needs of the city, the needs of the people, what our goal is first. And I think if you can start there, you can really get a lot done.
Dan just a little while ago alluded to a project that we're doing together called Ready Chicago, that is designed to reduce shootings and homicides in some of the most high violence communities in the city. And we're doing that with a lot of private foundations, but where the real collaboration comes in is that Heartland Alliance, as large as we are, we don't have a footprint or at least the right footprint in some of the communities that we were looking to do an intervention in. So so I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what the intervention is. The University of Chicago Crime Lab and Poverty Labs are using predictive analytics to develop a risk list of individuals who are at the very highest risk of being involved in violence. We're coupling that information with street-level intelligence on activity on the ground to identify the people who are right at the heart of the violence. And then rather than coming at them with strictly a law enforcement intervention, which is how the city has been approaching these individuals in the past. We are coming at them with a social services intervention, specifically jobs and cognitive behavioral therapy. We are taking an approach that is a relentless engagement approach, 18 months of a transitional job, and lots of work on cognitive behavioral therapy. That project, again, we couldn't do it alone, and so we went to the communities most affected and identified the community-based organizations that are trusted in those communities and said, who wants to join forces with us to design this program and deliver it together? So we are now working with 7 community-based organizations who are expert in street outreach and gang outreach, and experts in transitional jobs, and kind of come together as a force to be able to provide this program intervention and have it be rigorously evaluated by the University of Chicago Crime Lab, so that we know if it works and how much it works and for whom. But we're doing that just kind of banding together and saying we can reach more scale when we come together, and not in competition doesn't help us reach scale. We can learn more working together. When we come together, we can grow more. And it is our goal that this whole experience we all grow from and we are left better from it. So that's just one example of how we're taking an issue like violence, and through collaboration, I think putting together a really innovative, potentially game-changing kind of approach.
I think it's important for each organization, especially with us in the business development, economic development space, is to recognize what we do well, what we do with excellence, recognize what other organizations do well, what they do with excellence, and making sure that we're connecting our business clients with those proper resources. So I'm going to use one of our clients who's in the audience right now, Jimmy Williams, as an example. Now, Jimmy, if we had a group of everybody who was in the economic development, entrepreneurship space in the city of Chicago, and we used to have them raise their hand, whose client is Jimmy? Everybody would probably raise their hand, right? But part of the reason is because as a group, it's important for us to connect our businesses with the resources that they need, be it co-working space at Polsky Exchange, be it further business development through the Ascend 2020 program, be it through procurement with us, if they need financing through CNI. So it's really important to make sure that we recognize what we do well, we have an understanding of the landscape of what everybody else does well, and making sure that we connect our clients with those proper resources so that they can get the support that they need. Because it takes a village, not only just with a child, but with a business as well.
That's fantastic, thank you. Kevin, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the work that you do, both to tell us a little bit about the businesses that you're actually investing in and working with, but also can you talk a little bit about how you do this in a way that's authentic and really resonates with the neighborhoods that you're invested in?
Sure. So one of the big misconceptions, especially with our parent organization focusing primarily on the south and west side of Chicago, is that in order to qualify for our micro lending program, that you must be from those same area, and that is not correct. We'll work with anywhere within Illinois, so anywhere within Chicago, the surrounding suburbs, and we've even helped some entrepreneurs in the, towards the borders of Indiana and Wisconsin. So we're open application. We're here to help. Long story short. So please come out to us. But really, one of the ways that we help once again is, like I said, our holistic underwriting approach, which, to provide an example, let's say they go to their traditional lender to get a loan. Because of the traditional lender, they'll say, your credit score might be too low. Well, they can come to us, and instead of just saying, well, your score is too low, we're going to dig a little deeper. So we're going to do things like, what is the story behind this? What happened? What caused this? And even if we can see like credit behaviors are starting to change, so between the last 6 to 12 months that, all their payments are up to date. They've been actively getting things out of, they've been actively working on their debt. We can work with that. That helps to mitigate that risk because now we're seeing character traits in a positive way. So, we are 100% mission driven, but like I said, we're gonna have a much more, I would say lenient underwriting approach, which will allow us to give those loans from $500 to $50,000 for a startup or existing business. And I should say, in addition to that, really you can use those loans for pretty much anything. We can help with, working capital. A lot of the times we get businesses that they're getting good, revenue, but because of their business model, they might not get the paycheck until 60 to 90 days later. And now they're having a cash flow problem. So we can work with working capital. You need extra equipment for your business. You can come to us for that. So anything that you could potentially need, we can help with. One caveat, the one thing that we cannot do, we cannot work with any other nonprofits, as we're a nonprofit ourselves. And then anything that's, like liquor or bars or anything like that, we can't really work with. So we are mission driven. So, but like I said, 90% of the businesses we can work with. So if you know anyone that's looking, please spread the word out. I'd be happy to assist them.
That's fantastic. And Jason, I'd like to ask you a similar question. The Urban League clearly puts a priority on economic development. You have a specific role for Director of Entrepreneurship. Can you talk about your role within the Urban League's ultimate goals of racial equity in Chicago?
Thank you, Christine. Well, the Chicago Urban League, we don't just address racial disparities in economic development just through entrepreneurship. We also have a workforce development department, which helps people get jobs, helps with job training, and helps people who haven't been in the workforce for a while get back into the workforce. We also have our housing department, which helps individuals either keep their home if they're having mortgage trouble or get into homes and become first-time home buyers. The way we address economic development through the entrepreneurship side of things is through our Entrepreneurship Center. So our Entrepreneurship Center was founded in 2007 as part of a larger initiative through the National Urban League to create entrepreneurship centers across the country to spur economic development. So we've been in existence for about 10 years now. So pretty much the way our center is set up, we're not a center that exists just for the sake of entrepreneurship. So we're not here just to help people launch businesses for the sake of launching businesses. We're helping people. We exist to help people launch businesses so that they can create jobs. And that's the ultimate end and the ultimate goal of our center is to create businesses that are able to scale, that eventually be able to create jobs. So we work with businesses at all stages, be it at the startup stage where they kind of have an idea, just helping them get the right mindset to create a scalable business from the start. And we help some of these established businesses who need growth strategies or who are looking for procurement opportunities. So the way our programming is set up, I talked about the 3 M's earlier. Our programs are created to address each of those barriers, be it management knowledge. We have cohort-based training programs for entrepreneurs at the startup stage, and we have training programs for businesses who are looking to scale, and we have programs for businesses who are looking to grow their business and their capacity through procurement opportunities. As far as markets, we have a very robust procurement program where we connect individuals with contracts through the various relationships we have. We help them with the certification process. We're not an official PTAC, but we do everything that a PTAC does. And then we connect them with the appropriate entities to get certified. And then as far as on the money side of things, as far as getting access to capital, we work very closely with a lot of different banks, and we actually have banks that come on site to do one-on-one coaching with our clients to kind of get them funding ready. So maybe they're not quite ready to be funded, but like our partnerships with Fifth Third Bank, CIBC, and then we even have a partnership with Axion as well. They bring people on site to work with our businesses to get them to a point, let them know what the things they need to work on to get to the point where they're able to be funded. And then we also have a financial empowerment center through our housing department that helps people with their personal credit. Because oftentimes when people are launching businesses, they can't get access to capital because of personal credit issues. Or there may be issues where they've been hiding their tax burden, where they've been generating revenue. Now it's 4 years later, they're ready to get that second location, and they can't get it because their tax returns show that they haven't been generating revenue. In reality, they have, but they've been trying to hide the tax burden. So we work with businesses on those different things to kind of help them understand financial management, business management, getting access to markets, to really address those barriers. And by addressing those barriers, we can kind of start reducing some of those disparities that we talked about earlier. Because if you think about it, if we were able to get businesses, black-owned businesses in Chicago to the point where 10% were able to get full-time employees, and that's not even parity. If 10% were able to get full-time employees, what a difference that'll make as far as creating jobs in the community. Last but not least, I think it's important for us as the Chicago Urban League to evangelize, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of how big the disparities are of black and brown businesses compared to other firms. So I think it's really important to make these issues aware, start the conversation, so that solutions can be done.
I just wanted to raise the issue that while the folks up here, we have our programs, there are other really big opportunities I think we need to be talking about. Leslie, you talked about the Discovery Partners Institute. It is but one of many very large-scale development things that are in the works. And over 10 years, it's estimated that in Chicago, $6 billion is going to be spent on building things, developing. Obama Presidential Center is kind of the most famous of these. It's kind of in the news all the time, but there are many more similar kinds of projects like that. And where the city has repeatedly failed is in making those kinds of opportunities available to people living in very high poverty communities, the people who need jobs and economic opportunity the most, and whose participation in those kinds of projects would yield the biggest benefits for Chicago as a whole. And we've failed to make these connections, I think in part because of this collaboration, a failure on the part of the city to figure out how to create these collaborations. So I'm on the Obama Foundation's Inclusion Council, and one of the things we're doing is holding the foundation's feet to the fire on the Presidential Center around being very inclusive in who they select from everything, from procurement of professional services to construction contracts, who gets hired to do that work. So we're really trying to set the gold standard in inclusion. And one thing that strikes me is that these opportunities are coming fast and furious. And even when an organization, a company has a good intention and wants to be more inclusive, they don't often know where to turn. They might even turn to the Urban League, and the Urban League, try as they may, can produce, however many graduates you might produce in a given year, and it's not big enough. So because we're not coming together, we can't even meet the demand that's out there. And that's where I feel like collaboration can be a real game change for Chicago. Collaboration around workforce development, around making sure that all of the people that 40 organizations are working with have opportunities, and not just the ones that somebody knew to call. So I want to put out there these huge opportunities that we haven't made a connection to the people who need it most. We haven't made that connection well in the past, and it's something I think we're going to need to be improving upon.
Can I maybe just add something to that? And to take part in any programs or development that is occurring on behalf of the state, you have to be a state certified vendor. And when I was the state controller, and I'm sure that this is probably still going on, the controller's office would do a lot of outreach to small businesses and to organizations around the state to help them sign up and go through the certification process to be a certified vendor for the state. I know the city has a similar process, and I think the city actually had done a better job than we had in the state at the time in actually getting small business and companies, particularly in the areas that need jobs and development the most, to become part of this database that then could take part in state contracts or city contracts. And so I think, the first step is an education process, and getting these organizations that might want to be part, while they might not have a large enough business, to be the prime contractor or the prime supplier. They can most certainly be a subcontractor and be part of it. And the state works very hard to make sure that we have a vast number. We have minority-owned businesses. We have minimums that we have to have on each state contract. So we're limited by the number of companies we have to choose from. So the more companies that want to sign up, be part of the state and city vendor programs, that gives us a greater pool than to go out and ask for bids from. And so, I think it's a partnership in respect.
No, that's fantastic, and really appreciate the advice that both of you have offered in terms of ability to get involved, but also ability to really make an impact across organizations. And I think that's a great way to conclude the panel before we go to Q&A. Dan, Kevin, Jason, do you have any advice for either large or small entities that are looking to make great impacts on our local neighborhoods and how they can do so more effectively, given your experiences in the programs that you run?
I think for me, we live in the melting pot of the Midwest. Chicago's so diverse, and I see a lot of these larger organizations or corporations come in and they just have like this cookie cutter, one size fits all solution, and it's not the way it works. You can't take a little village and compare it to Inglewood. Their problems and their situation is not the same. So there are some things that these individuals, communities need. And so I think the best way to start is just to go out to the community, get connected with the aldermen, some of the community leaders, and really find out what that organization needs and take what you already have and kind of alter that and make it more innovative, and so it's more impactful for what their impact is.
Yeah, I would just say collaboration is key. And when we launched this initiative, we probably spent 6 weeks leading up to that talking to probably 25 of our colleagues, nonprofit organizations, other foundations, corporations, other corporations, just sort of saying, what are your thoughts about this approach and how can we be aligned? And we did have some partnership opportunities that emerged out of those conversations. But we launched it at a roundtable at Instituto with 35 nonprofit corporations, government leaders around the table, and our message was, we've got about $10 million in the hopper of what we're thinking about funding, but the lion's share of the resources have yet to be distributed. So we really want to kick this off and say, we want to collaborate with you. We want your ideas, suggestions. How can we be more intentionally aligned in the neighborhood we want to work in? So that's our goal.
Jason, any concluding thoughts?
Sure. I would give large organizations the same advice I give our business owners. So before you attempt to launch a product or you're trying to launch an initiative, understand the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So get intimately familiar with the problem, get intimately familiar with the psychographics of the customer, which is the community, stakeholders, and then from there, that's how you reverse engineer your solution. So it shouldn't be a cookie cutter approach, right? And oftentimes a lot of people think you can just throw money at a problem and it'll go away, right? But it's important, if you're gonna make the most out of those investments, is to really take the time to get the data, to understand the community, to understand the problem that you're attempting to solve. There's nuances that may exist in Bronzeville that's different than Inglewood, that's different than Roseland. So you have to understand these different nuances, and really, once you understand it, then you kind of tailor and you alter your approach to address it. So that would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. No, thanks very much to all of you. We're excited to open the floor to questions. Sarah has a mic and we'll be coming around with it. Maybe we'll start with the woman in blue here. And if you could just give us a second to get the mic to you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Hello. Is it on? Okay. Hi, my name is Florence Hardy. I'm the Director of Business Services for the Far South Community Development Corporation. And so we do a lot of what Jason does, but further south. And my question is for Dan. I know a couple years ago Chase had this loan fund for minority-owned businesses that was in partnership with BEDC. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And it failed miserably. So what is going to be different, or what did you learn from that experience that you will apply to this new commitment to the community?
Yeah, great question. You know, you take some risks and you hope things succeed, and sometimes they don't. And we are encouraged to take risks in the work that we do. And BEDC, I think we learned a lot from that partnership. Probably the most predominant lesson was they were extraordinarily successful in Los Angeles and in Southern California. And then when they moved to expand their national footprint, it just didn't work. And yeah, so I think that's the biggest lesson we learned. We have a few people on our national team who are doing a much more significant deep dive, so I'm happy to talk more to you offline about that.
This gentleman in the red.
Am I in red?
Let's say.
Hi, I'm Kevin Jackson with the Chicago Rehab Network. Appreciate everyone's vantage point and the efforts you're making on behalf of investing in communities. I'm curious of any comments on, you know, one of the great economic engines of our society in America has been housing. And there's been a real problem with getting people connected to the jobs with all the development. Evelyn, I love your comment about repeatedly. It takes courage to say these things, that the city's repeatedly missing the ball on this. And one of the key things that's happening in the city of Chicago, and we see throughout the region, and I dare say it's across the state, is this issue of displacement. And what you see, the displacement issue is on the north side, where you see a lot of investment going on. People who are of moderate income, limited income, are quickly losing their housing opportunities. And on the south side, people say, well, there isn't a displacement issue, but it's in fact what people are so concerned with the investment of Obama Library and other type of micro-reach center. And it's this displacement happens when we see deterioration. And so we seem to fail to connect how CDCs, that's what the rehab network is composed of. So how do you get jobs in that housing arena so that people in local communities have that opportunity? And we also need to think about the policies that keep people in neighborhoods that are transitioning.
I'll take a stab at it. Pretty much, I look at it from an entrepreneurship lens, and I also look at it from that standpoint, right? So there's a couple different issues as far as getting subs and on these opportunities, right? So there's capacity building issues with small businesses that are in small firms who are looking to do these to get involved in these opportunities. So that kind of alludes back to what I was talking about earlier, as far as investment in some of these firms, as far as their education, their knowledge, to be able to contribute to some of these opportunities. Because firms that like with the Black and brown community, firms that look like them are more likely to hire them, and that's just the reality of things. But then I think there's an awareness issue. And we've been actively working with the state of Illinois, with Amiel, CMS, and making individuals aware of the certification process, getting them certified so that they can go after a lot of these opportunities that the state is offering. Because the state buys everything, right? So I mean, even if you're like selling hair products, the state has, the state buys it. So the thing is ultimately, developing those partnerships as well to get these businesses certified so that they can, get involved as subs, as primes, and grow their capacity to become primes, so they can hire individuals. Because as we go through this economic development transformation, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for these firms to get involved and for these firms to be able to create jobs. I can say that I'm excited that a couple of our clients are actually involved in the Obama Presidential Center, as far as being firms that's going to be involved and being able to create jobs. I know Turner Construction and Ujama Construction are two that come to mind right now. There are our clients who are involved with that project. So I look at it from that standpoint. How can we create more awareness about these procurement opportunities, and how can we build these firms' capacity so they can hire individuals and get on these projects?
The next question, please.
So thank you for the presentation today. There's lots of things to say, but I want to take this opportunity to direct comments, particularly to Deputy Governor Bunker. I want you to hear, for me as a Chicagoan, how devastating the budget impasse was to all of the efforts that these folks were making. When we talk about signing up for becoming a state vendor, Well, you can't, what's the point of becoming a state vendor if you're not going to get paid? And a lot of the small businesses, social services organizations, absolutely devastated and will continue to be so, probably for another 10 years because of the budget impasse. So I admire the things that you're talking about. I hope they're all successful. You know, I'd love for you to promise me that's never happening again, and I know you can't. But I need you to hear from me as a Chicagoan that that budget impasse has done more harm to our city than probably anything that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years.
So just a comment. And I say this putting my fairly deep knowledge of the state's financial situation through my being the state controller hat on. The budget impasse was a result of many people not coming together to pass a budget that's balanced that we can afford to pay for. It is not just on the governor's office, it was also strongly on the legislature's head, because the legislature sent the governor a budget that spent $7 billion more than we had projected to come in revenue. Now, any of us who have to manage our own checkbooks know that if you spend that much more money than you have coming in, you can promise payment, but there is no money in the checkbook to write the check. And so the budget impasse happened because of an unwillingness of both to come together to work to pass a budget that's balanced, which is constitutionally required in the state of Illinois. The difficulty that we have now in the state funding a lot of things, and I spent a lot of time as a state controller traveling all over the state, working with organizations trying to help those in need. And I don't know that I see anyone that I recognize in the room here that I would have talked to, but I can tell you that we expedited payments where we could to organizations where we had the legal authority to pay to help keep them open. We worked very hard to sign up companies and get them certified to take part in state business. But even once we had a budget, which we just got back in July, we still do not have a budget that's balanced. We still, with a tax increase, have a budget that's spending about $1.7, $1.8 billion more is going out than we have coming in. And so the challenge is not on, it's not about a budget impasse. It is about holding our leaders, governor, but also our legislators who pass the budget, who send the budget to the governor for a signature, to put in place budgets that we can, that are balanced, that what we commit in spending matches what goes out. Because I will tell you that my first few months as a state controller, first 6 months, we had a budget in place. The first thing we had to deal with was promise of child care funding that was not funded, that we had to go find $1.5 billion to pay for. We have a backlog of bills in the state. I think that's somewhere around $16 billion. This is not because of the 18-month budget impasse. It is because of years, decades, in fact, of promising things that had no funding. And so it's incumbent on all of our leaders, all of our legislators and our governor to work together to have budgets that are balanced that we can afford to pay for. It doesn't help to promise funding to any organization, small businesses, human service groups, because then they go spend the money, they commit those funds. In the case of small businesses that help the correction centers, they spent that money, they delivered food or services, and then they waited 8, 9, 10 months, a year to get paid. And they were going out of business.
Let me just say this, because I think other people probably have questions and comments. My comment wasn't a blame Bruce Rauner. My comment was, frankly, anybody who had the responsibility to do something and didn't, they should be shamed and they should be blamed.
So I'm just saying it's a large issue. I guess I just took it because you directed it to me as deputy governor, and I just said it is a problem. We need to ask all of our leaders who are involved in the budgeting process to pass budgets that are balanced.
Good afternoon. My name is Andre Diaz. I'm the President and CEO of the Chicagoland Black Chamber of Commerce. This was a very exciting panel. You brought very good information. I would like to say that we can partner with you guys. We're part of a large-scale development that's coming to Inglewood, breaking ground this year. $70 million Black-owned, Black-controlled development. This will stand from 59th and Halsted through 61st and Halsted, both sides of the streets. 240 units, 30,000 square foot of retail space, and a new multi-million-dollar family center. But what's key about it is the developer is floating a master bond for the entire project, so all black subs can bond under him. He's also floating a certified payroll, as well, so the subs can also fund their payrolls. But he also, too, bringing a statewide reentry program to Illinois as well. So it's going to take that type of collaboration. There's going to be 20 to 30 black businesses that go into our development. I'm a lifelong Inglewood resident, and I'm on this great project. But with that being said, how are we going to put people to work? Look around the city, y'all. All this construction we're talking about, you see very few black or brown people. And why is that? As a policy person for the chamber, project labor agreement. I've decimated black and brown communities for all these years. And that's why you're still going to see very few black and brown people on these big projects. Obama Presidential Library, I know all 4 of the black partners. They're all signatory to the union. That's going to be an issue. So we got to address that. How do you address it? With an open shop. If it's a closed shop, it's game over for black folks. And this 35 years experience talking, fighting at the street level. So I'm a policy person and a development person. So I understand both sides of the fence. So like you said, the city has failed down from a policy standpoint and how our tax dollars are spent. Thank you.
So I'd like to make sure that we ask questions. So I really appreciate what is being said, and I encourage afterwards that there continues to be conversation. But let's go to the gentleman here in the center. Whichever sees his screen.
Okay, my name is Alan Winthrop. I'm a resident of the South Shore community. I noticed that several of the aldermen down in our part of the city, and I'm asking this a question as to how much this has been a hindrance for economic development. But you've had like Alderman Harrison, who's trying to down zones from 71st Street, so that new businesses should not be established there, and she's got to take that off the table. And on my own ward, the 7th, Gregory Mitchell has come up with this proposal that no new businesses can be established unless he gives his approval, which is kind of like asking for a kickback in order to get a business that approves. And so, how much is this a common hindrance, and what can we do about this to prevent aldermen from basically blocking new businesses and economic development?
I don't know that I have enough expertise to really.
I mean, I don't really know. I will say, as far as in Pullman, Alderman Beal has been awesome. So he's constantly in our office, and as a matter of fact, I mean, we just opened up a Whole Foods distribution center. I mean, we couldn't have done any of this without the alderman's help. So I'm sorry you're dealing with that with your alderman, but I want to support mine. So.
Thank you. My name is Bernard Lloyd. I run Urban Junction Foundation, which has worked on 51st Street since 2005 to revitalize that strip. We have an incubator space, we have a Boxville, a shipping container, retail mall. My question is to Kristen Barrett. Kristen, you have articulated the desire, the aspiration of helping to empower or drive economic development in the South Side. At the same time, your organization continues to undermine the entrepreneurial ecosystem on the South Side by underpricing co-working space. Very, very dramatically. You charge $50 a month, which is a level of fees that is not anywhere close to the market. You cannot develop and operate any co-working space for that price. So, as a result, if you suck out talent, and you essentially eliminate the possibility of other spaces developing in your neighborhoods around you. Why are you continuing to do this, and what will you do about it?
So I think you're misunderstanding. So we're a nonprofit organization, not looking to make a profit off our entrepreneurs. We're inviting them into a program that has a lot of educational content, and they pay a small monthly fee to be part of that community. So while I understand that you've opened a space, I also understand it opened after we were already in the market, so I'm a little bit confused as to where you're coming from, but I'm more than happy to sit down at a different point, and we can have a discussion if this is your business and learn about that, so.
One more question.
Sarah, let's go up to the top.
Okay.
Is it Jimmy?
Yes.
The guy called out before?
Oh, shit, right here.
Hello, everyone. I would like to say thank you for being here. And I'm living witness what investment in my community can do. I started my business because I was having a hard time finding a job because of my past. And a program like all the programs that the Chicago Urban League provide in our community is literally helping take small businesses to the next level, from startups to existing businesses. So we need more investment in our community on those levels. And another thing, Dan, I heard the question that you said lastly, where do you make the investments? Prime example, I would like to say thank you for the Ascend 2020 program. Just attended the Northwestern cohort, and it was phenomenal. In the process of attending the Ascend 2020 program at the UIC as well. So, that being said, I'm in the process of trying to create a program for individuals like myself who's had a hard time getting a job because of where they come from. So the program will consist of 9 months in the field, hands-on with equipment, tools and equipment, and 3 months in the office, training them on all the managerial skills of running a business. So not only do I want to create more jobs, I want to create more business owners. So in whatever way that you can help me do that, I'm a living witness of what help in a small business can do. Last year was the best year we've ever had since being in business. Thank you to the Chicago Urban League for everything that they have done. I've got my general contractor's license, I have my MBE certification, and I can go on and on. I just received the Community Impact Award from the Chicago Urban League as well. So that is my question to you. How can we help a small business like mine bring more jobs and more businesses to my community? And that is my question.
Well, so Ascend 2020, for folks in the room who haven't heard of it, it's an initiative where we're working closely with the University of Chicago as well as Northwestern University, trying to leverage their own expertise about entrepreneurialism and how small businesses can grow. And they're working with a cohort of, I think, 10 to 15 mid-sized to small businesses to think about how they take their model to the next level and increase employment. So we were really heartened by the initial, we're in our first year of cohort. We think it's going very, very well. It's something we're thinking about expanding going forward. If we could just talk offline about your specific circumstances, I think it'd be easier.
Thank you all so much. I think that is as much time as we have for questions.
Thank you so much. This is a really good discussion. We will be posting a video online, and we're happy to hear your comments. Please drop off your event evaluations for us. We really want to hear what you thought.